Hello, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. So we are about to start. If you want to leave in the chat, where are you from and from where are you watching us? We're so happy to have you all here. And if you don't mind answering the poll that should appear on your screen, so we get to know you better and we know if you are already a Real Estate IQ subscriber and if you would like to have a one-on-one consultation of our services, together with a free demonstration of our tools. That would be fantastic. So welcome to everybody. We are so happy to have you here today. So let's get started. So we are Real Estate IQ. For the ones that haven't heard of us before, we have more than 500 webinars hosted, more than 100 keynote speakers, and more than 12,000 registered attendees. Let me tell you a little bit about us. So who we are a lead generation software and solutions company focused on helping real estate investors like you kickstart their businesses. So we strive to become the platform and resource to help them achieve their real estate dream. What do? We provide the real estate solutions to make deals come true. We offer a suite of lead generation automation tools, educational content, and additional services to the real estate industry to help entrepreneurs kickstart and grow their business. So this is the streamline of our solutions. We offer off-market leads to find the freshest data mined straight from the card houses daily on our data portal. We offer also events, free education led by experts, and training on our solutions. Keep tracing, get homeowners' contact information effortlessly. CRM, perfect to track listings and marketing campaigns. Virtual assistants, virtual support for administrative tasks, customer service, and more. Fire, personalized financial checkups and consultancy. EVA, run real estate comps in seconds with our renewed evaluation CMA. CLM, we now provide custom off-market data mining all over 50 states. And last but not least, the membership. Tailor plans to meet every investor's needs. So this is the deal of the day. Today, we bring you this golden lead to grow your business. You can contact us to learn more. Also, by scanning the QR code, you can sign up to get the full address and submit your deals to advertise. So don't miss this amazing opportunity, this pre-foreclosure. You can get all the information here. And you can also join us in our newsletter so you can stay informed with Real Estate IQ's weekly newsletter. You can get market insights, data updates, and event highlights, all you need for successful real estate investments. So don't miss any of our weekly updates by scanning the QR code that appears on the screen. You can also request a consultation, a complimentary 30-minute in-depth one-on-one demo of Real Estate IQ's solutions with one of our experts. We'll walk you through everything you need to know. So for more information, you can contact Prisnet at realestateIQ.co or also scan the QR code that appears on the screen or answer the poll that should appear on your screen as well. Today we'll have Francisca that in a couple of minutes, she will do a free demonstration of the portal. So you will see a little bit of how it looks like. So these are our social media accounts where you can follow us as well. We are in Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, and you can use the QR codes that appear below of each icon so you can join us in our community so you don't miss any of our news and weekly webinars and in-person events. You can also Learning Made Easy. Here is the Academy. Here you can find our best webinars and short courses so you can stream it at any time and from wherever you are based. You can log in to stream to learn more. Today we have Tracy with us talking about, do people really own or finance? The who, when, and where revealed. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. Tracy began investing in notes over 30 years ago when she quickly realized that she'd rather be a landlord than a landlord. Since 1982, Tracy has landed millions of dollars in real estate notes. She started on the institutional side, heading up the due diligence department as VP for one of the nation's largest seller finance note buyers, loving the business but wanting to work for herself. Tracy started her own note buying company in 1997, along with noteinvestor.com, an online newsletter for private investors. Tracy specializes in using tax-advantaged retirement funds to purchase notes and helps lenders wanting to teach tenants to be the bank by safely creating and holding paper. A well-known educator, she's passionate about sharing her knowledge and guiding others on their note investing journey. So we're so thankful to have her with us today. And before we move forward with her, we have Francisca, as I said before. She's from our sales team. She's gonna do a free demonstration shortly of our portal. So Francisca, we are moving forward to you.
Thank you. So I'll be sharing my screen now. Mhm. Okay. So again, hello everyone. I'm Frances from Real Estate IQ, and today I'm pleased to give you a walkthrough of our portal and website will illustrate on how it may assist on your real estate business. So here is our homepage of our portal, and the most important part here is the off-market leads. And the off-market properties that are included in off-market leads are pre-foreclosure, probate, heirship, tax sale, eviction, divorce, and among others. All right. So let's say, for example, for the pre-foreclosure tab, you can choose the state, um, say Texas, the city and county. Search by auction date and added date by going through the filter option. Okay. So let's say for this month, uh, the latest one is April 1 to April 17. Sorry, 16 rather. And the auction date will be on May 7. Okay, since it's always going to be the first Tuesday of the month for the auction date. So click on apply and the leads will now generate. As you can see, there are about 740 items available for the all state taxes. All right. So if you wanted to, if you also have an option to mark or choose favorite on the first column here. Okay. And you will see the property information, the financial information as well. And if you want to get more information about the specific leads, that you can just click on the details here, and it will show you there. It will show there the added date, the recorded date, the auction date, of course, the information of the property owner, the first and last name. All right. And it will also give you the information if there is available, how many available a bath, bed, right? And five email address, five cell phone number, or and at the same time phone number, a close information and information of a close relative, and um a flag, bankruptcy or deceased. So those information will be available on the details here at this part. And if you want to download it on Excel file, you can just export it by SLXX or as a CSV. All right. So we also have here, if you want to get to know more about our portal, our company, you can just click on the FAQ. There will be a question there like, how do I get started? And as for the academy, this would be a recorded webinar that you can check out at any convenience. I mean, at your convenience time. All right. So our portal website are user friendly and customizable to fit your company unique needs. So if you want to add any additional, if you wanted to know more about or any additional information you might need or want to book a demo, just simply agree on the prompt or pull message that you will see after the demo. So thank you for taking time to watch the demo.
Thank you, Francisca, for your time. So moving forward to you, Tracy, we're so happy to have you with us today. And thank you, everybody, for attending.
Hello and welcome. I appreciate everybody attending today. One of the ways that you can find leads are people who will owner finance as well. And so this goes great with what Francesca was talking about. I've been working with owner finance notes since 1988, and people are always surprised when they hear people owner finance. So we're going to talk about today, do people really owner finance, and how that can help you, whether you're a buyer or seller or somebody who might want to sell some of their properties and create an owner finance note. Every year we gather statistics about owner financing, and it might surprise you that owner financing is on the rise. So this year these numbers come in, interestingly enough, about the end of March, because it takes a couple of months for all the counties to get their recording information available for us to pull and analyze online. So we are always excited in spring when we get to share these trends that are happening in seller financing. And we felt all through last year that seller financing was on the increase, and now we've got the stats to back it up. So we're going to talk about those key trends and some things as far as average note amounts, loan to values, what kind of property do they create these seller finance notes on, what states are most popular for it. It happens in all 50 states, but there are some states that make up the largest amount of the volume. And then when you're looking at seller financing, we see a difference between what we call the mom and pop, somebody who's just creating one note in a 12-month period, or somebody we consider more professional that does 3 or 4 or more in a year. And then what's happening in 2024, and how can you apply that to what you do? So owner financing, how big is that market? Well, let's first start by understanding what owner financing is and all these great pieces of information, what they apply to today. Owner financing is when somebody owns a piece of property, they sell the piece of property to a buyer, somebody else gets to live in it and pay the taxes and insurance and upkeep. And instead of having the buyer go get a bank loan, which we're mostly all used to, either bank loan or having to pay cash, that seller of the property allows the buyer to make payments to them instead of getting a bank loan. That's why they call it owner financing, seller financing. Some people call it an installment sale, a seller carry, but all of these statistics have to do with somebody who owned a property, sold a property, allowed that buyer to make payments to them over time instead of getting a bank loan. Now, this is a small segment of what we call the note industry. We have private lenders out there. So those would all be additional deals in addition to what we're talking about here. And we also sometimes see non-performing notes or notes that banks are selling off because of foreclosure or people are deceased. And those are all different additional deals too. So today we're just talking about this very specific niche of owner financing. So how big is that owner financing market? Well, in 2023, there were 28 billion with a B transactions. And that is not an anomaly because over the last 5 years, there's been over 125 billion. So if you're a buyer thinking people don't own or finance, or if you're a seller thinking people don't own or finance, or if you're somebody who'd like to buy a note and thinking people don't own or finance, I think these numbers show that differently. 28 billion is a very large piece of the pie. It's even larger when you start thinking about those private lenders that we talked about as well. Now, in 2023, the dollar volume went up over 24% compared to 2022. And the transaction counts went up about 7.3%. So we've tracked the dollar volumes. That doesn't make us too surprised dollar volumes are going up because transaction home dollar sizes, the median home price, that continues to go up. So that's the same thing with owner financing. But when we look at the count, how many individual transactions were owner financed, that was up by 7% as well. And it's a little bit surprising in general because we know in 2023 that normal home sales, existing home sales were way down. In fact, they were down about 18%, according to the National Association of Real Estate Agents, some of the slowest home sales since 1995. And we know a lot of that is because some homeowners are feeling they want to stay in their house because of all the high interest rates out there. They're just not selling off their home. So while in 2023 saw slowdown in home sales, we saw the increase of seller financing. So we did the opposite of what the general home sales did. We saw more seller financing. So why do you think that is, that seller financing is going up, why home sales in general are going down? Well, for the last 30 years, we've been tracking this, and we find there's a big correlation between how much seller financing there is and how hard it is to get a loan from a bank to buy a home. This mortgage credit availability index is released by the Mortgage Bankers Association, and it tells you how hard is it to get a loan to buy a home. So when it's really high up there, that you saw, it was over that 185 mark between 2017 to 2019, it was easy to get a loan from banks. Interest rates are low, their qualifications weren't too hard. Prior to that, after the subprime mortgage meltdown, it was very hard to get home loans. We all know why during that time. But it really steadily increased. It was easy to get a loan. And then you can see that second arrow, it dropped off when COVID hit. Banks started to pull back and get a little bit tight with their lending. They weren't quite sure what was going to happen. They wanted better credit scores and more down payment. And then we see in 2022, that third red arrow, it dropped off again. And that's when interest rates started going up. When interest rates started going up, it's harder to get a bank loan for several reasons. One is that because the interest rates are up, your payment is higher and your principal and interest payment is higher. It makes it harder to qualify with their debt to income ratios. But that's not the only reason. Banks have a lot of uncertainty what's going to go on in the market, not just with interest rates, but the economy in general and conditions in the world, and whether the secondary market, Freddie and Fannie, are going to buy their loans. And so they have just really tightened up. And right now it's as low, it's as hard as it's ever been to get a home loan, as hard as it was after the subprime mortgage meltdown. So when that happens, we see seller financing has an increase. Over the last 10, 15 years, we look at the owner financing, and it went up after the subprime mortgage meltdown, and we see it now. It is going up again because it's harder to get home loans from banks. Now, all these statistics we're going to talk about today to show that people really do owner finance, they have to do with first positions. They don't even have to do with second positions. Their loan balances of $30,000 or more, and they also include wraps, but not seconds. And it's from the counties around us, like 2,200 counties report this data online. Some don't, or some are so small, it's really hard to get that data. So we're just dealing with most of the counties, but just know that there's even more out there because we're not dealing with counties that don't make it easy to get this information online. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's great, it's residential, but we see that owner financing doesn't just happen on residential, it also happens on commercial and land. And we like to look at how that 28 billion from last year gets divvied up. And we saw that the majority of it, between 50%, 14 billion, or 56,000 by count, that's 63%, were residential homes. So this would generally be residential 1 to 4, but mostly single family homes. The next largest group was commercial. It was about 9.3 billion, 33% of the dollars, and about 17% of the individual transactions. So that just means the commercial bills were larger than the residential. And then land saw about a $3.8 billion in land, about 16% of the count. So we see that it's just mostly residential, then commercial, and then land. And then there's a little bit that the counties don't tell us in the data, how much, what was each category, but we feel like it pretty much divvies out the same as it does. When we talked about what's happening for the last 5 years, that 125 billion, we can see that what's kind of happened is that residential has been steadily going up, but it dropped down a little bit in 2022, but it went back up in 2023. It went up about 17% by the dollar volume. Commercial was the big increase. It went up almost 60% by the dollar volume. Land stayed about the same. So we're seeing a big increase in owner financing for commercial. And that is no surprise, because if you think it's harder to get a home loan right now, it's even harder to get a commercial loan right now. So we're seeing a lot of the multifamily, the people with a larger multifamily or mixed use commercial that are turning to owner financing instead of getting bank loans. And if you've been out talking to commercial lenders, you will know that that is definitely a challenge right now. A lot of people think owner financing, people don't put any money down. They have that misconception. And we like to look at average loan to value, meaning the amount of the seller finance loan compared to the sales price, and then also the average amount of the owner financed. And so in residential, it's about 248,000 is the average owner financed balance. That was about a 10% increase over the prior year. But what might surprise you is that the loan to value is 74% on most owner financed homes. That means the buyers put down 26% or more. Now, not all buyers have that much to put down. We usually recommend if you're seller financing, you get at least a 10% down. 20% is preferable. If they don't have 20% and you accept 10%, then we say, well, maybe press another 10% into a second lien. So you've got a 10% down, an 80% seller financed first, and a 10% seller financed second. There's some advantages to doing that way should the seller ever want to sell their note. Then we look at commercial. The average balance on a commercial owner finance deal last year was $613,000. That was a whopping 41% increase over the $432,000 balance from the prior year. So then the size of commercial is really increasing, and I really believe that's because it's harder for them to get those kinds of loans from banks. Still a good down payment, 72% loan to value on commercial. So that went up a little bit from the prior year. So they weren't putting quite as big a down payments down on those bigger balances. And land, the average size we see is about 263,000, and they have an average loan to value of 70%. So putting almost 30% down on those land deals. Now I see a lot of land deals that are much smaller than this. I think this number gets a little bit skewed because we throw out everything $30,000 or below, but I see a lot of itty bitty land notes. I don't know about you, but we see a lot of owner financing on land notes. And I like to thank Advanced Seller Data Services because they're the group that helps us put all of this data together. Now, where is seller financing? I promised to do the who, what, when, and where on seller financing. Well, 67% of that 28 billion is produced by just 10 states, and the remaining 40 states make up about 33% of the volume. In all the years we've been tracking this, Texas has been #1 as the top producing state for seller financing. They had 25% of the volume, and when we try to track what states have the most seller financing, we don't use the dollar volume, we use the count, because we don't want certain states with really high value properties like California, looking at you, or New York to run away with it. So Texas had about 25% of the count, and followed by Florida and then California. Sometimes people are surprised there's seller financing in California, but it's not all the big city. You're right, there's a lot of rural area in California as well, and that tends to be a little bit more where you see that. Not so much in Texas. Texas has lots of seller financing in major metropolitan areas, but not as much California, just because they do tend to be bigger deals. Georgia was #5, North Carolina was #4. So those are the top 5 for seller financing last year. And then we round out the top 10 with Arizona, Washington State, New York, Pennsylvania, and Oregon. And those were actually the top 10 for the year prior too. I think New York and Washington swapped spots, but they all kind of lined up very similar. And when you look at that on a map, you can see it kind of starts up there on the left-hand corner of the United States and goes down the coast and comes across and goes up the coast. So that tends to be the areas with a lot of seller financing. We do track seller financing for all 50 states. And if you are curious about those numbers, you're welcome to visit our website, noteinvestor.com/stats, and we will be happy to share the information from today's presentation. Now, let's talk about the makeup of people who seller finance. If somebody just carried back one seller finance deal in a 12-month period, we call them a mom and pop seller. That may be the only note they've ever carried or the only one they're ever going to carry, or maybe they'll do another one down the road. But about 86% of that volume was made up by the mom and pop note sellers, and about 14%, the other 14%, were people who created 2 or more notes. So those sellers owned more than one property and they sold it with owner financing. And we break that down even further, and 8% of the whole created 2 to 3, and 6% created 4 or more. So why is that interesting? Well, If you or somebody wanted to buy property, you could go out and look who seller financed more than 2 deals last year. They might be great people for you to contact to see if you could buy a property with owner financing. Or perhaps you want to owner finance and you want to learn what these professionals do to make sure that their note is the safest and the most valuable, because a lot of people will sell these owner finance notes after closing so they can recoup their capital. If they're rehabbers or renovators, they'll sell their seller finance note and then so they can move that money into their next deal. So both of those sides of the group, that you can learn how to use owner financing either when you're buying property or selling property. We've also seen a big increase in what we call wraps and subject twos, where that seller has a nice low interest rate bank loan, say 3% or 4%. And now they want to buy the property subject to sell it on a wrap where that new buyer maybe pays 8%, 9%, 10%. So not only do you get the increase in value, so you're buying for a lower price, selling for a higher price, you get that equity spread. You also get something called an interest rate spread. So if you are only paying 3 or 4% and you're able to charge someone 9 or 10, you're making a large spread in between those two payments. And so in addition to real estate appreciation, you can do arbitrage on interest rates. And that's another reason a lot of people are starting to look at seller financing, because there's a lot of low interest rate loans out there. Now, who are the people that are owner financing? Well, 57% of these take title and sell in as an individual, like, Tracy V. Rui or Jane Doe and John Smith. So those are that's an even smaller number than the mom and pops, which tells us that some mom and pops are using entities as well. The next segment, 32%, use some kind of corporate entity like an LLC or an S Corp. And then the remaining 11% use some kind of trust. So that could be a revocable, irrevocable trust. It could be a trust through an IRA. A lot of IRAs, people buy and sell real estate and do notes, Roth IRAs, traditional IRAs, 401ks. So those are usually set up as trusts as well. So any type of entity structure can be used, but there are definitely some benefits to doing it in a retirement account or in a corporate entity. So what's happened in 2024? We'll talk a little bit, and then I'm going to take some questions as well. Well, what we've got going on right now, we all know there's this interest rate and inflation dance. So as inflation goes up, they start raising interest rates, which in effect raise mortgage rates, and they're trying to restrict the money, make it cost more, slow things down so inflation levels out or comes down. They keep talking about maybe they will start lowering interest rates, but it doesn't look like they're going to do that right away. They talked about maybe 3 cuts this year, but they haven't done it yet. And now that inflation is kind of still looking like it's ticking up and down, they're kind of pulling back on whether they think that how much they'll lower interest rates. So I think that because of that, we're not going to see big declines in interest right now. We all wish in some ways it would go down, but if you're making money off interest, then you like the higher interest rates. So if you don't like higher interest rates, I tell people you just need to get on the right side of the cash register, the other side of the cash register where you're receiving the interest instead of paying it, and they won't be as bothered by it. Or learn to use wraps like I talked about earlier, where you can have some arbitrage. There's also low real estate inventory. A lot of people are not selling their homes or moving, but they're seeing some of that inventory to start opening up. People are getting a little bit more used to the interest rates. They think they're here to stay. Some real estate markets have softened. Some are still going hot. So there's really regional differences there. We know that there's a lot of banking challenges. We already talked about that mortgage credit availability. We know that commercial has a lot of challenges. We've got an election year coming up, so nobody's quite sure what's going to come of that. And then we have global uncertainty as well. So when those things happen, we just don't think we're going to see a decrease in owner financing. We really feel like we're going to see an increase, because as long as it continues for people to get harder to get financed, we're seeing more owner financing and private lending, hard money lending, private lenders, all those people we talked about that aren't owner financing, but are still private lenders, different than banks, which is a whole nother set of numbers, which is equal to or larger than this. So I really believe if you're not paying attention to owner financing and private lending, that you're really missing a big segment of the market for either financing your deals or selling your deals when you finance. I think I'm going to pause real quick. I've got an example transaction, a real life example, and then some ideas how you could apply this. But before I do that, I'm just going to pop over here to the chat and just so I don't get too far along before I answer any questions. Robbie asked, who writes up the contract for a seller financed deal? That is a great question. If you're working with a real estate agent, most of them have some kind of owner financing addendums. Most states have state real estate contracts that are approved by their real estate board, and most of them have a seller finance addendum. If you want to see samples, we create them in our Creating Notes masterclass. But usually if you search the state and seller financing addendum to a real estate sales contract, you'll usually see that. If you don't have a qualified real estate agent, not a lot of them understand seller financing, I'll be 100% honest. You could use an attorney to write up the contract as well. Some states have very knowledgeable escrow closing agents. Usually those states I mentioned that were the top 10, they usually have some people who are really knowledgeable in that. So you could use an attorney or a closing agent in your area as well. Let's see. Robbie also asked, making money with interest rates means you would be the lender, correct? Yes, normally if you are making spread off of interest rates, it means you probably bought the property subject to some low interest rate debt, or maybe you own a piece of property already that you are renting out and you have low interest rate debt. But either way, you're owning property and there's low interest rate debt on it. And then if you were to sell it on a wraparound mortgage or all-inclusive trust deed, depends on the state, and charge a higher interest rate, then you get your payment in at the higher interest rate and you send off the underlying payment to the lower interest rate. So on one piece, you'd be the lender, and one piece you would be the borrower. So in that situation, you'd be both. So great question. I do a whole session on how to make wraps work for you. And I know I did one for Real Estate IQ, and they do archive those. So if you're interested, Robbie, on how to do that, I do my 10 tips for wraps and exactly how to make money on those. It's a great question. I think it's a very underutilized and very important thing to take a look at in this market. Let's see. Lisa asked, how do you fund a house or land that you're going to seller finance, since you must own the property before you can sell it with seller financing? Good question. Are you supposed to go to the bank to get a loan, then wrap your loan for the seller finance buyer? So if you are going, a couple of things. If you want to be the seller, it means the best place normally for people who want to try seller financing as a seller is to take a property they already own where they are a landlord and they're tired of being a landlord and they would rather be what I call a lien lord. So landlords have to maintain the property, pay taxes, pay insurance, and handle tenants. Lien lords sell the property that they own and they don't want to be a landlord anymore. They don't want tenants, they want home owners. So those home owners would keep up the property, pay the taxes, pay the insurance, and they treat the property like an owner, not a tenant. And now the landlord becomes the lien lord because they sell it, they take back owner financing, and they get that interest rate. So how did they acquire that property in the first place that they were a landlord on? They most likely bought it and had a bank loan on it, or maybe they bought it and used seller financing, or maybe they bought it for cash. If you don't own any property and you'd like to use seller financing, then you can say, well, I'd like to use seller financing as the buyer. I want to buy a property and convince the seller to owner finance it for me. So that would be one way you could owner finance it. You might then turn around and sell it with owner financing to someone else. I've seen people go out and buy, negotiate to buy a piece of property from a seller for 2 or 3%, even in this day and age, or maybe 5%, because it's backed by real estate, but they can get 5% in a CD. And then they turn around and sell it with seller financing for 9 or 10%, and they create that interest rate spread. So that would be another way. Another way, Lisa, is if you bought a property subject to the seller's existing debt, and then you turned around and sold it with owner financing. So all three of those, I mean, you could also pay cash. You could also get a bank loan to buy it and sell with owner financing, but paying cash or getting a bank loan at higher interest rates right now doesn't really create that spread that we were talking about. So those are different strategies how you might be able to make owner financing work for you. Let's see here. I go see if there's any more questions. Do you think seller financing is greater in Texas because Texas does not lease option past 6 months? So, Lisa, that's a great question. We've talked a lot about Texas. Texas, for the 30 years I've been doing it, has been the largest seller finance state. And that was even back when they allowed lease options. So I do think that limiting lease options and contract for deeds in Texas probably does contribute to more seller financing. I also just think Texas is a big state. And also, seller financing has been around a long time in Texas. And when something becomes normal, more people do it. They've heard about it, they understand it. In fact, Texas has some of the best laws already on the books for seller financing that protects both the seller and the buyer. And they actually have laws pertaining to wraps, exactly how you would do those. So because they have these laws that protect both sides and it's been around so long, I think that's another reason that there's a lot of it in Texas. And I also know that there are a lot of buyers in Texas that are I-10 buyers or maybe have non-traditional forms of income. So we see a lot of seller financing with buyers who maybe don't have 2 years of consistent W-2 income. Maybe they're self-employed, maybe they're ITIN or I-10 buyers. And so there's a large number of that in a population in Texas as well as some of those other states that are in the top 5, like Arizona, and we have it in Florida and California. And I think Arizona, those also contribute to more seller financing because those buyers have a harder time getting a bank loan. Robbie said, why would an owner decide to choose to select a lower interest rate than the current market rate? Yeah, great question. Because they aren't as, here's a couple of reasons. Some sellers get stuck on price. They want X dollars to sell their home. And they don't care if some of it gets paid now and some of it gets paid over time. And just a little bit extra interest was great to them. A savvy seller is going to want market interest rates. But those mom and pop sellers, they might be more fixed on price than they are on interest rate. So that's a really, really great question. I mean, believe it or not, Robbie, I've seen sellers sell for 0% interest rate in today's market. If that seller came to me, I would advise them not to do that, because if they wanted to come to me, a note investor who would be willing to buy their note, I have to discount that note down quite a bit. I can't pay 90 cents on the dollar. I'm probably going to only pay 50 or 40 cents on the dollar because I have to discount that 0% note rate down so I can get a 9 or a 10 yield using time value of money. So I don't recommend sellers do that. Now, if I'm a buyer, would I love for the seller to give me 0, 2, 3, 4, 5% interest rate? Oh yeah, I would love that. So you kind of have to decide what hat you're wearing in the situation when you're negotiating. I like personally to have win-win situations for both sides, but some sellers will be willing to finance at low interest rates because it used to be people will be, oh, I'd love to get 5, 6, 7% on seller financing because they could only get 1 or 2% in a CD. But we all know right now people can get 5% or more on a CD. So but it happens. It continues to happen. It happened in 22 and 23 when interest rates were up. We still see a lot of low interest rate notes on seller financing. So great for the buyer, not so great for the seller if they want to sell. Thank you for answering my questions. You're welcome. Happy to do it. What resources can you suggest to become more educated with creative seller financing? Definitely go to our website, which is noteinvestor.com. I'm going to give you a couple of resources that we have here coming up. right after I do this transaction. So I always like to show a transaction because we talked a lot about seller financing and statistics, but let's look at how a deal might work. So this was in Mesquite, Texas. It had a sales price of $210,000. The buyer put down 9%, which is $18,350, and the seller financed in a first and a second. So remember I talked about sometimes buyers don't have 20% down. In that case, it's kind of nice to put some of it in a first and some of it in a second. Well, this is exactly one of those transactions. So the seller financed at a 75% loan to value for $157,000. And he did that for 9.5% for 30 years, $1,320 a month and some change. Then the seller sold their first to cover the acquisition costs. This is actually a rehabber property investor. So they had bought the property for less than $210,000. All right, so they made some money between what they bought and sold it for. They sold it for $210,000. They got the $18,350 down payment. They got a $157,000 first note. They sold the $157,000 first note for $152,000 to a note investor like us. And so they walked away with the down payment and the proceeds from selling off their seller financed first. And they kept a seller financed second. So if you got 210 minus 18,350 down payment minus $157,000 first, the balance is this $34,650 second. So they held this second. So the seller bought a property, sold it for more, created a first and second owner finance, sold off the first owner finance note, and kept the second. And now they have a monthly cash flow of $316.96 because they got 10.5% for 30 years. So wow, that is a great strategy because I see a lot of fix and flippers, rehabbers, property investors that are living deal to deal, and it gets tiring and you got to find deals. So if you can find a way to make money on that deal for some profit now, and you can create some profit, some cash flow over time, then you have a situation where you're not always having to look immediately for your next deal. Now, I know $316 isn't going to be enough to cover all your expenses, but if you say you did 10 of these and you got that coming in for 10 years, 15, 20, 30 years, then you do another 10. I mean, it adds up over time. So you had asked about where can you get some additional information? Well, on our website, we have some great information. We have 21 tips for note investors, 5 ways to cash in on notes, and we also have a specific class related to creating notes with seller financing. So if you're interested in buying or selling property using owner financing, learning how to be a private lender, you can find these notes that already exist and refer them to a note investor like me, and I'll pay you a fee. You can actually wholesale a real estate note, just like you wholesale real estate. Some people want to buy notes and hold them for interest income in their self-directed retirement account. There's ways to buy a full and sell a partial. This is like when you buy a pizza and you sell off some slices and still keep half the pizza. That's kind of what a partial is. People buy notes and they borrow against them, just like you can borrow against real estate. You can borrow against a real estate note. Some people like to buy non-performing notes, notes in pre-foreclosure, and then get access to the property that way. Or some people like to buy and restructure. So all that information is at our noteinvestor.com site. If you go to noteinvestor.com, you'll see the free ebooks. If you go to stats, STATS, that's where you'll be able to download this. When you download this, you pop in your email and then we'll send you some information we've got coming up. We have some free webinars, lunch and learn webinars that we'll be doing that we talk specifically about seller financing. So I really appreciate everybody coming here today. I wanted to just make sure that I have answered all the questions. Can you post a link or tell us where to find the documents? So I do not provide the actual documents because they do differ in all states. In our Creating Notes Masterclass, we do some common documents in those top states. But if you perform a Google search even for seller financing, deed of trust, Texas, then that would do. I don't know where you're at, Robbie, but I could, basically substitute that for your state. Just, you have to know whether your state is a deed of trust state or a mortgage state. And some states like Michigan and Iowa and some of those, they still use contract for deeds as well. I think I got all of these questions. I'm going to stop my slide share and just come back on and see if anybody has anything else, because then I can see it in a. Here we go. Excellent. Robbie said, I'm in Texas. Great. Yeah, so let's see. Who knows so much about owner financing Texas? I can tell you a couple attorneys that are super smart. Alan T. Cheshker, he knows a ton about seller financing. I think his last name is Ceskar, but if you do, he has called the RAP University. So if you look that up, you will see that. Lynn Horn is another one who knows a ton about seller financing, is another attorney in Texas. You also have Texas Pride and Texas Star Escrow, and they are specialists in seller financing. Scott Horn is the attorney. I said Lynn Horn. I'm sorry. You are so right, Lisa. I know somebody else named Lynn Horn, and sometimes I switch their names up. It is Scott Horn. He's the attorney. Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Yeah, he is so knowledgeable. I just had a friend I helped tutor to buy a note in Waco, Texas, and Scott Horn helped him out a lot. And the great thing about Texas, if you're in the note business, is you guys are a non-judicial state, and it's pretty creditor friendly. And so the borrower was a rehabber, fix and flipper, and for some reason thought they didn't have to pay anymore. And Scott Horn was able to help them out and get that foreclosure started and get that buyer borrower back on track paying, because he had the money, he just was trying to play hardball. So you do want a good attorney every once in a while. If you have a note that's not paying, just remember that you have the same rights as a bank. So if somebody stops paying on owner financing, you can start a foreclosure process just like a bank. And if they don't pay you, you get the property back and you can resell it again. So don't get too worried about that. There are some states I'm not a big fan of buying notes in because they take forever to foreclose in. States they tend to be New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, some of those New England states. They're very borrower friendly rather than creditor friendly. And those tend to be the judicial states. Would your Mesquite example be considered a partial? Great question. Actually, Lisa, no. It can do the same thing as a partial, but it's a different structure. So that's a really great question. We also do a whole class on perfecting partials. A partial would have been where they pushed the whole balance. So if you got a sales price and a down payment, and the amount left over was all into a first and there was no second, then that first would have been bigger in my Mesquite, Texas deal. And then somebody would have sold off on a partial, say the next 15 years of payments. And so then that investor would get the 15 years of payment, then the note would go back to the seller and they would get the last 15 years payments. So a first and a second divvies it up and you sell off all the first, which has some advantages because there's some investors that prefer to buy all the note, not part of the note. And then there's a second, and there's some advantages to the second because the second means you get cash flow right now, or when you sell off a partial, you usually are selling all of the payment for the next X number of years, be 10, 15, 20 years out of the 30-year term. And then you don't get some payments every month until it comes back. But there are some disadvantages to seconds too. If you ever wanted to sell the second, it's harder to sell a second than it is to sell the rest of a partial on a first, because if you sell the rest, it's a whole first note. Wow, I got some cool backgrounds going on here. I don't know how I did that, but that's pretty cool. So, sometimes I like it first and second, and sometimes like just a first and a partial on that. So really, really great question. Do I have a video on our website for negotiating with sellers to provide seller financing for you? We talk about that in our Creating Notes Masterclass, both as the buyer and the seller. That's a great one that we probably should look at adding, to our website. So partial delays your cash flow for a while, but eventually you get it, correct? Yep, that's exactly right, Lisa. We have some examples of partials on our website if you'd like to look at those too. Robbie says, deal structuring is so very interesting to me, but seems difficult to find reliable resources. Well, I hope you feel like you found one today, because we do a lot deal structuring. That's what we talk about a lot, because, you know, it's one thing to say, oh, seller financing is great, but it's a different thing to implement it in your day-to-day practice. And it's a good question to say, how do you negotiate it? Because not every seller will seller finance, right? We're just a small segment of the market. So you do ask a lot for sellers to finance before they will say yes. It's really a strategy of figuring out what their needs are and how you can meet those needs. And sometimes it means helping them create a note that they can sell off because they need to get some of their money back out of the deal. So thanks everybody for stopping by today. I do encourage you to go to noteinvestor.com. We have over 300 free articles. We've got a YouTube channel, and we've got our Lunch and Learn series coming up. And my husband and I love owner financing. I didn't talk a lot about me because, you know, they read my bio, but I have been doing owner financing for over 30 years. I have seen the market change, and owner financing is always there. It's just sometimes more of a buyer's market, more of a seller's market. The interest rates change. But I'm a big fan of seller financing. I think it puts the control back in our hands instead of the banker's hands. And I think it's a really good alternative for people and property that don't always qualify for traditional financing. So thanks for joining me here today. And thanks for the folks at Real Estate IQ for putting on this webinar.
Thank you, Tracy. It's always amazing to have you with us. We're expecting future webinars.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye-bye.
See ya.